Rob Thompson, Game Plan You today. Here we are live. Brad Paz from Zoptic is with us. Just talk about your journey to get to where you are right now as a founder.
Right.
Okay. Yeah, it was a long one. I came in as a non-technical solo founder. So a lot of the things I had to learn, were brand new to me from especially the hardware and the software side of it. Um, the journey, it was hard, but the key was just networking and finding the right individuals, which, the right individuals is kind of open-ended because there has to be that fit. I think initially this started as more of a passion project for my daughter is really what it was about. I was trying to get her better at basketball, and sitting on the sidelines, my hands were tied because I'm not a coach. And it was more about just helping her reach her maximum potential. It wasn't something where, hey, I need to jump in here because we're going to get a D1 scholarship. It was just that father in me that wanted to do what I could for her. So that's kind of where it started. It took a year or two for me to kind of do some discovery and research internally, on what I could do. Is this viable? Can you make money? Does it add value? And then about 2.5 years ago, we met with a D1 university with one of our early prototypes. And that's really where I saw that there was an opportunity. So I transitioned and went full time with this opportunity. Since then, I've brought on some really fantastic people to help me, which again, I think is hard, but key, because all of this is fun and, great ideas, but if you can't execute, that's the most important thing. So that's kind of the journey. I guess, fast forward to today, and this is this is our fourth iteration of our prototype. So it's not pretty, but it works. And, we've got a great plan going forward as far as getting it into the market.
So talk about it. So talk about the project. Just give a general overview of what exactly the technology is and what it's used for.
Got it. So it's a video and wearable player tracking system. And what it does is the athlete wears this little tag, and it captures a detailed digital copy of their performance, typically in a practice environment. And then we deliver that insight and objective information to the coaching staff. So typically this kind of information was reserved for just pro athletes or pro teams. But it does help take a little bit, or at least some of the guesswork out of coaching, which I think is important, because when you talk about having that information when you're when a coach is optimizing training or managing the well-being of an athlete, those are really important things. So basically, they wear the tag, the camera follows them, collects a bunch of different metrics, goes all into one system, processed, analyzed, and then distributed, whether it's to the coaching staff, the parents, things of that nature. So I think that the real crux of it is, strengthening that art and science of performance coaching, because the pressure to win is just, it's so high, even the 14-year-old age group, all the way up the chain. So that's a little bit about it.
Great. And, you talk about coming from the technical side, and you're bringing in some talented people to work with you on that project. And we have one of your staff with us, and you want to introduce your guest?
Sure. So we're bringing on Tanya Porter. I'll let her I'll share a little bit of her background, but she was the head of performance technology for the U.S. Olympic Committee for 21 years. She's had a very deep knowledge of what we're doing, just her background. She sat at the table from many different angles that I've experienced, kind of on my own. She's a very welcome add to the team. But I'll kind of turn it over to her from there.
Great. So Tanya, here you are, live from somewhere in Colorado.
Yep. Hello.
So talk about this though, the importance of technology mixed in with athlete and player performance, the analytics piece of that. How have you seen it evolve since the 20-something years you've been part of it, especially with the Olympic Mini?
Yeah, it's been a long journey. Early stages were where we were doing things from absolute scrap metal, development of PCB boards, reconfiguring commercial products to work for an athlete environment. Now, over the years, we're starting to see a little bit more consumer-oriented products, as well as, the next level, which has been adapted, and is primarily in with professional sports and the elite athletes. The one nice thing with Zoptic is the market that looking to address is going to be more at the club and the high school level because of the means with putting the technology together at a little bit more affordable rate. What comes with all of this is data. And what I've learned over the years is there's a lot of data generated, but there's not necessarily a lot of people that are prepared or knowledge to interpret that data and to put it into a solid application in terms of performance training, injury prevention, and looking for performance opportunities. And I say it in those ways because those are the different areas that people want to address. Some they don't know what they don't know. So we always have to lead with a lot of education. And that's just been the way it's been over my career, is that a lot of the time you might have a new technology, but you've got to go in and teach them how it's going to improve their performance or their goals that they have got set through their club or their university or school. And I always start with the coach first or the end user first, whether it be a parent, an athlete, or a coach. Start it within their terminology and then work it back to the technology. You can't necessarily lead with the technology because they don't understand it fully or they don't necessarily know everything they can get from it.
How much is technology or the data, the analytics, and then to your point, because you're spot on. I hear this over and over again. It's that interface of what actually is the stuff that makes sense. Like, how is the user experience? If I'm mom or dad or grandma looking at, an app and seeing that Susie, gosh, she's on the yellow meter of how much her body is heated up right now playing. How has that changed since you've seen it in the last probably 5 years or shorter on that user experience now? Is that a big part of the development process?
Oh, absolutely. And your example there of, kind of the moms and pops and the family members, understanding that data, sometimes it's a snapshot of data. So they, as you said, they might see Susie and she's in a yellow spot of data, but they don't know how that relates to previous days or the training or the games and what is the cause and effect of that data change or of that current state of the data. And so there's a lot of learning and a lot of metrics that are starting to evolve through some of the science research as to, what is a threshold for injury prevention. Like decelerations in some of our sports are very, very key, but it's a matter of bringing your athlete up to be able to understand what their body can adapt to and sustain, and when does it become over the top in terms of understanding and risk management. So there's a lot of awareness that has to go on with all these data points, and it just makes it, there's so many data elements, and you're also getting athletes who are bringing their own wearables to the table, and they're trying to interpret that data, versus you've got something like a Zoptic system, which is bringing a team set of data, and which is individual data as well, but then it's hopefully being interpreted by a high performance coach And, you've got to mix what the athlete, what's dangerous in terms of what they know from their own little metrics to something that we want to present to them in terms of what is the industry or what is their sport understanding about those metrics, and where does it put them at risk, or where is it that they need to get to find that next level performance opportunity.
Let's talk about the next piece of this, because I think this is an important piece, the business side of it, right? Especially when you're talking about club soccer, club basketball, travel ball for that 6 to say 15-year-old, where you're starting to talk about an infusion of cash that's pretty substantial for some families. And you're also talking about a justification of coaches on playing time, right? And the investment in that child to develop. I'm sure obviously it's a massive part of the Olympic development programs that go up. The data, how important is that data now for a coach's perspective? And do they use that data to then go back to mom and dad and justification on some things that they're doing, or the development of that child? I've spent this much money, coach, on this program, on this club team, on this travel team. Now coach could go back and say, well, let's look at some of the data on why your child's not developing quick enough, or why they're not getting as much playing time. And this question is for both of you. So Brad, let's go with you first. Was that a big core of the reason why you developed this platform?
Yeah, I think it gives another layer of objectivity, right? Because a lot of this is subjective, right? Where the coaches are making decisions, our gut reaction. So I think it's another layer. I had a football coach said he would love to have that data, because when the parent comes to say, why isn't my son starting? He could pull it out and say, because he just dogs it at practice, right? So that wasn't why I built it. My vision with it is having that data, the family of the athlete, I think is powerful, and there's opportunity in that, because if they choose to leave to another club or maybe go to the next level, I think that historical data and what we pull together as far as insight would be an opportunity to really help that athlete advance, right? And that to me, that's what it's all about, right? How can we help those players who might be C players become B players to A players? At the end of the day, that's what it's about for me.
Yeah. Tanya?
Well, certainly there's a danger in access to the data and interpreting the data. Especially when you're talking about this younger age group, as you referenced, long-term athlete development, there has to be an understanding of that. And not everybody is developing at the exact same rate at the exact same time. So there has to be faith in the system, as also in the coach and the interpretation of the data and of their intuition. So, we're not going in there to say we're replacing any type of intuition of coaching or using data to make any hard, fast rules with respect to playing time, contracts, whatever it might be. But it's additional insight to complement the process and to help motivate and look for those opportunities as to where they can get to. So if you're taking a younger age group and you talk about a young athlete, as Brad referenced, you could say they're dogging it in practice. Well, they can see their metrics. They can see team metrics potentially, where they could look at kind of anonymized data as to what their team is doing versus what they're doing, or what the next level athlete is doing and where they need to get to. So I think there's opportunity there, but there is a bit of danger if people just look at a single metric and say, I compare better than player B, and why am I not playing? Well, there's a lot more that goes on to that. And, some of it's not anything that we're going to be able to measure either.
A big part of athlete performance and player performance and tracking data, especially, I look at the example of what the Premier League and some of the teams are doing over there in Europe. And obviously they have that athlete for a lot longer period of time, right? They may capture them in the juniors from 12 or 15 all the way up through so they could track it. And I think it's useful. What do you see now? Do you see this as kind of following this information following a young athlete from the time they're 12, 13 to 15 all the way up through their adult life now? Is that the guts of this? That's kind of the story of what you guys are trying to produce? Either one. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I should have picked one.
Yeah. No.
Yeah.
I think so. I mean, you're building a resume, right, for the athletes. So I would say yes. It'd be very interesting, right, to have the data on somebody who was in, let's say, 14 and made it to the NBA, right, or the NFL, right? A parent may have a very similar athlete at the age of 14, right? So you map that projection on what that athlete did. I think there's a lot of value in the information, but to Tanya's point, you've got to be cautious of how you use it and how you interpret it. But it's the direction that everything's going. I mean, all of the things that we're doing right now has been validated in the pros, right? So it's possible. It's just taking care, right, of people's information, but also allowing them to have access to it, I think is important to me.
Yeah, the value of the data, for the specific athlete, their historical data is probably not as important as their, current, most recent data in terms of their development. But where it becomes important is with respect to the research, trend analytics, starting to learn what the data can tell us with respect to modeling of risk management, performance opportunities, as Brad alluded to, with respect to looking at younger athletes and seeing how you can project where they're going, or at least put a roadmap as to where they need to go with their data and the development of their physiology and skills and things like that. So it's got a lot of potential with respect to the data, anonymized data that we'll learn from. But the athlete, the pro, when the athlete does get to a pro, their historical data doesn't have as much other than the learning factor that we can get from it.
What do you see as far as scoring? Do you see this technology being used in the overall outcome of a game from hey, we have a review, an instant replay on a particular, well, I mean, if you look at some Olympic sports where there's subjective scoring, like figure skating or downhill skiing, where there's a grade system on it. Do you see this technology or technology like this being used within, or is it already there as part of the judging, kind of a real finite judging matter?
I don't think we're going to be at that, putting it into play in those sports specifically, just because it, as Brad alluded to, the arts and the science of it. I mean, yes, you're starting to see metrics, whether the ball crossed the line, things like that, that will be absolutes. You're starting to see professional programs that are utilizing some of the load monitoring from IMU devices and player tracking and making decisions based upon it. But I'm not sure you're going to get down into an automated judging element, just because, you'd need a full motion capture system of all the appendages in figure skating, for example, to be able to say what an optimal routine is, or an optimal movement of a jump or something like that. And that's not necessarily what we're targeting right now. We're targeting more tactical movement, understanding loads, and all the advanced analytics that can come from the different sensors of the IMU that are more individual and team-oriented with respect to player development, and understanding what the demands of the game are, that will utilize those to be able to enhance player performance, but not so much, I don't think, in the judging sports.
Well, fascinating. I thought that was a good question, by the way. Do I get 2 stars for that?
It was great. That was great.
I threw that one out there. So let's talk about the biggest challenges that are in that space with technology. And I think you both touched upon it earlier on. It's the interpretation, but how much are these coaches embracing technology? Because I'm sure there's a lot of old school coaches that still go by instincts and character and understanding the kids and the athletes. Brad, we'll start with you. What are you seeing is from the coaches embracing this?
My experience, and we've done a significant amount of discovery, is there's quite a few of the high performance coaches, especially at the collegiate level. I see them on Twitter. They're talking about it, learning it, understanding it. I think what happens and kind of goes back to this whole thing where we're really trying to be focused on what we do and do it well is affordability, right? And scalability. Those are the two big things. So I think some of the institutions can't really afford to buy the technology for their performance coaches based on what's in the market today. But I do think that, that there are quite a few coaches out there that would embrace it. I think prior to Tanya coming on, a lot of times they would typically dictate what they want to see, right? They would say, well, I want number of decelerations in practice, and I'm like, okay, well, we'll get you that. So it's one of those things where, we kind of have to gradually incorporate the system around what their beliefs are. And then once we earn that trust and deliver, that's where it gets expanded. But then, as Tanya mentioned, it's that education piece, right, where we can start taking it down to the mass market.
Tanya, and I want to add a little bit to this for you, because I know that it's 20 years ago when you came in talking about this to Olympic coaches and organizing committees and the administration. Did they embrace this, or were they still old school thinking?
It was a real mixed bag. You've got, the nice thing with the Olympic programs is that you've got an international community that's pushing everybody forward. So you have a lot of coaches that were looking for a lot of different angles. How can we get better? How can we, be more fit? What do we need to do to get better than our opponents? And so, the nice thing is the international sports research community shares a lot of that data. Now with the technologies getting down, so they're available to almost everybody at the Olympic level, then it became more an exposure of understanding to the coaches that we deliver. Coaches at our universities now and even at the high schools, they're trying to keep their job by keeping their success rate and attracting better athletes. And so they need these technologies, they need these tools to complement, again, their intuition and their coaching skills. And that's why you're also seeing a lot of coaches putting sports performance professionals as part of their high performance team so that they can make more informed decisions. A lot of the time in professional sports now, say the MLS, it's their athletic trainers that are doing most of the load monitoring. And then they sit with the coach and work with the coach to do some adjustments based upon what happened in that practice or what they need to do in terms of tapering or active recovery based upon load monitoring. And they work and help the coach understand that more. So they're doing a lot of the education, but we're having to do the education towards that group now. So it's not always, working at the top coach, but they have to be open-minded and bring the right people in, and then they have to be open-minded to bring the right technologies in.
Where are we in the United States? Are we behind what some of the European markets are doing, or, God knows what the Russians have been doing, but how far behind, or are we ahead of them from a technology and embracing the technology?
I'll jump in on that one, Brad.
Yeah.
They, there's certain elements where sports are much more premier in, across the pond markets. So they're a little further ahead. Athlete data management, which is kind of the underlying tool of all of the technologies where you're bringing all the data into a single source and generating reports, is a little further ahead in the European community and over in Australia. But then we've got some elements here in the United States where, we've got great manufacturing engineering that's going on, that we might have a technology that's, with respect to maybe a special fabric or something like that, or friction, things like that, that the United States is further ahead. Certainly our pool of players, is larger than almost all the other countries around. So that helps us get, build that pyramid to the top as to the number of athletes that we have to select from. But from a technology perspective, it kind of is in this hand, it's United States might be ahead, but from an overall player tracking and stuff like that, we're a little behind, but you're starting to see the coaches are looking for instances of player tracking and athlete data management and understanding data to make their jobs easier.
Brad, what's next? What's next for you guys?
It's really getting this into the field. That's the biggest thing. And, executing on a couple of hardware upgrades that we're going to do, but ultimately get it in the hands of the coaches, start that product market fit of the system. That's our number one goal. And with that goes raising capital. So.
Yeah, that's a big part of it. Final thoughts, Coach Tanya, final thoughts.
It's a really great time for sports technology. Obviously with my years at the USOC, the technology really wasn't even part of the conversation other than maybe some engineering, but putting it into a performance element has grown immensely. And it's great to be on this wave. As we've mentioned, along comes it with education and coaches seeking to understand their sports better, for knowing that, okay, I need this data to support my program. So that's what we're hoping is going to be kind of the next wave along with the actual technology, but it's an education process as well.
It certainly is. And well, I could say one thing. Thank goodness I wasn't wearing one of your wearables and I was tracked for the last 3 months, because I would have been in code red the entire time of little to no movement at all. Well, thank you guys for your time. I really appreciate it. This has been wonderful and very educational. So thank you on behalf of all of us at Game Plan U. That's Team Zoptic over there. And so you have getzoptic.com is all their information. It's an awesome website. And you're redoing the website as well? You're refreshing it?
Yes, we are.
All right. So it's pretty cool right now as it is. So I appreciate your time, everybody. Go check them out. Thanks again for watching Game Plan U today. Take care.